If you missed session one, we're gonna have all the recordings up on the StartOut YouTube page, so you can always go back and catch up. But I think, Heather, if they missed session one, they should still be able to participate today, no problem, right?
Absolutely. The sections are each kind of they'll build on the one that came before it, but they're also their own independent thing. So yes, if you miss session one, that's okay. You can always go back and watch the recording and you'll still get just as much out of each of them.
Awesome. I love that. Um, Great. Well, I will get started with our little start out intro spiel, and then I see that Sarah's letting folks in from the waiting room. So as folks trickle in, that will be perfect. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for part 2 of our Art of Pitching series. We are so excited to have, I see some folks who are new and also who are returning from last week. My name is Kayla, and I'm happy to welcome you to today's session, which is put on by StartOut. If this is one of your first time attending one of our workshops, I just wanted to provide a little background on StartOut and who we are and what we do. So StartOut is a nonprofit organization, and we're working to accelerate the growth of the LGBTQ plus community to drive economic empowerment, building a world where every LGBTQ plus entrepreneur has equal access to lead, succeed, and shape the workforce of the future. And we do that in a few ways. One is with webinars just like this, also with in-person events in our chapter cities. We also have an accelerator program, a mentorship program, our access to capital program. So lots of ways to get involved. So if you are new to StartOut, I invite you to check out our website after this call and see if there are other resources that might be helpful for you. But that is enough about us. I am super excited to welcome back to our host today, Heather. So Heather, thank you so much for being here today. I'll pass it off to you to introduce yourself and then get us started.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Thanks everybody for joining. Again, my name is Heather Lawver. I'm the founder and CEO of Ceemo.ai. I am also a proud graduate of StartOut's accelerator program, Growth Lab, which I cannot recommend highly enough. So if you're an entrepreneur looking to learn, grow, and scale, definitely apply for that. But to get started, I'd love to go ahead and share my screen. The way the session will work today is I'll give about a 20-ish minute presentation, and then we'll dive into Q&A and learn together how to apply what we've learned in theory in practice to apply specifically to you, your venture, your challenges with presenting, public speaking, all that good stuff. So if someone could give me a thumbs up, you can see my screen. Awesome. Okay, let's get started. So on behalf of StartOut and Ceemo.ai, I want to thank you for joining us today. I am so excited to welcome you all to the second installment of the Arts of Pitching. Again, I'm Heather Lawver, founder and CEO of Ceemo.ai, and I will be your host over the course of these 4 total events, all about getting you ready to pitch your company with confidence. Let's get tonight's party started with part 2, Pitch Like a Star. Just like last time, let's set the stage for folks who weren't with us and talk about living in startup land. Here, 2 things are certain. First, every startup needs a pitch deck. And second, every founder needs to present. Yet, as vital as these 2 things are to every startup's future, why do they remain such a mystery? At Ceemo, we're determined to help founders like you demystify the pitching process using our unique tips, tricks, and methods that we'll go over today. Tips and tricks, which, by the way, have helped founders just like you raise over $170 million in venture capital. So let's dive in and increase your odds of getting funded too. If you weren't here last week, that's okay. We covered the art of storytelling and how to use your own story as a founder to inform the story of your pitch. If you missed it though, don't worry, we got you. You can catch the recording, RSVP for the next 2 events, enter to win our grand prize, and get access to all of our free pitching resources available at ceemo.ai/startout. With all that said, it's time to dive into tonight's theme and get you ready to pitch like a star. Your journey to commanding a stage begins long before you ever stand up before your audience. In fact, the destiny of your pitch, the impact of your pitch hinges on decisions made back at the very beginning. Just like we talked about last time, when you build your pitch narrative, you're building the very first steps to commanding that stage. But it's the next step that is the most important and the one where most founders trip themselves up without even realizing it. That step is taking this storyline and transforming it into either a pitch deck or a presentation deck. More often than not, entrepreneurs treat these two as one and the same, but they are completely different mediums. What most people think of when they hear the words pitch deck is actually intended to be emailed to an investor who then reads it alone at their computer on their own time with no other input from you. Whereas a presentation deck is meant to be, well, presented by you as the speaker and narrator, either on a stage or over Zoom like this. Entrepreneurs think they can save themselves a whole lot of time and hassle by simply making one deck to accomplish both tasks. But this is the first mistake that can drastically diminish the impact of your presentation, stealing you from your spotlight. Why? Because it all comes down to a difference in your audience's experience. What do I mean by that? Well, let's put the audience back where they belong and dig into this a little bit. When it comes to planning your pitch, I want you to think about your deck in terms of whether you're reading a book or watching a movie. Even if the content of the story itself is exactly the same, our experience of perceiving that story is radically different. It's exactly the same for the audience of your pitch. When you create a pitch deck that you plan to email out to investors, I want you to think of it like a booklet or brochure, something that's designed to be read alone at the audience's leisure, requiring no other input from you because it contains all the needed information for the reader to fully comprehend your pitch. That's all well and good, but it's a very different experience from a presentation. Because when you get up on the stage as the star of the show, you suddenly have a wealth of tools you don't get in a book. Instead, you get to engage both sight and sound, creating a cinematic experience that's focused on you as the star of the show. These two different pitching mediums both need to tell your company's story, but when you do it right, your emailed pitch will be far more impactful, and your presentations will truly keep the spotlight shining on you. But let's prove the importance of this concept by showing what happens if you try to present with a standalone email style pitch deck. When you do that, you're essentially asking your audience to simultaneously read and listen to you speak all at the same time. So ask yourself, when was the last time you read a novel and listened to a podcast all at once? Our brains simply weren't designed to take in that much information from two separate senses all at once. We can't do it. It's simply too overwhelming. Yet, when you present with an email deck, that's precisely what you're asking your audience to do. You're asking them to task switch constantly, which is exhausting. But most importantly, it simply doesn't work, and your own deck will end up sabotaging you. Because I guarantee you, with the way our minds are wired, as soon as your audience sees that giant block of text, your audience will start reading, and their ears will shut off. No one will hear what you have to say. That is the exact opposite of what you should be trying to achieve as a presenter. So when you're designing your slides, I want you to think about a principle I like to call balancing attention. Giving a good presentation is a lot like a juggling act, except instead of juggling brightly colored balls, you're juggling your audience's attention. That attention needs to be carefully and meticulously managed, split between you as the presenter and narrator and your slides. You are primarily an auditory source, while your slides are a visual source. This presents its own challenges to your juggling act because the human brain naturally focuses more of its energy on visual stimuli. The vast majority of our brain's processing power is devoted to interpreting signals from our eyes. Literally 90% of the information being absorbed by our brain is processed visually. That means in order for you, the auditory source, to be the star, you have to be exceptionally careful in how you plan your slide deck in order to ensure that you remain the star of the show. Think of it as making sure that every bit of that 90% of visual stimuli is there to serve you, to reinforce you, rather than distracting attention away from you. In short, the entire purpose of your slides is to make you look better, to make whatever you say more impactful, to make everything about your presentation more memorable. Because at all times, you should be Beyoncé, and your slides are your backup singers. Everyone should be focusing on you, the star of the show, while the rest of their attention is paid to the backup singers, which only serves to reinforce how awesome you are. So you might be asking yourself, how can I be Beyoncé? The trick is in following the example of Queen Bee's backup singers. All the single ladies, all the single ladies. Now put your hands up. Notice her backup singers faded back, letting Beyoncé carry on into the verse. After all, she has her backup singers for a reason, to make her shine. Naturally, Beyoncé would lose a little of her luster if her backup singers sang every single word she does as she does. Beyoncé is not and never has been a choir. This isn't about one voice, many voices becoming one, but rather one voice standing out from the rest. Similarly, you don't need to put every single word you say up on your slides. It limits their impact, makes them run together, and frankly, it gets a little boring. After all, this isn't a projected printout of your script. It's not a teleprompter. Instead, reserve your backup singers, your slides, for the hook, the chorus, the catchiest bits of an earworm that you don't want forgotten. Use your slides to highlight certain impactful keywords, or better yet, find ways to visualize meaningful concepts and statistics. Whatever it is that you really want to drill into your audience's heads, whatever you really desperately want them to remember, that's what goes on your slides. Think of it as a sporadic echo, a visual scaffolding around your ideas to highlight and reinforce your most important statements. Finally, there's one deadly sin that backup singers should never ever commit. Thou shalt not start singing that catchy chorus while Beyoncé is about to sing the first verse. That'll get any backup singer fired because, spoilers, man, no one wants them, whether it's a TV show, the big game, or your slides. Don't ever let your slides get ahead of you. Now, let's take a look at the Beyoncé principle in action. Generally speaking, for the majority of your presentation, you should have 75% of your audience's attention on you and 25% on your slide deck. Every so often, you can shift up that balance for the sake of powerful imagery to create extra memorable moments, but it should always be deliberate and planned. Attention must be wielded as a tool, harnessed and directed for maximum impact. That said, most of the time, the audience's attention should be managed to highlight you. Just like with your backup singers, the catchiness of your song depends upon maintaining the balance to ensure your audience is both engaged and absorbing information easily. That balance is maintained by ensuring your slides always visually represent whatever you are currently saying. When the narration matches the visual, what the audience hears and what they see effortlessly matches, ensuring they easily understand, comprehend, and remember everything you're talking about. In short, you aren't making them work for it. Information is flowing freely and easily. The balance goes awry when the narration either no longer matches the visual, or worse, your slides start getting ahead of you, showing seemingly disconnected images that have nothing whatsoever to do with what you're talking about at the moment. Or in other words, spoilers. All of this confusion means the audience isn't listening to you at all anymore. They're too busy thinking, did he click the wrong slide? Did I miss something important? Is the puppy going to wear the turtleneck? I mean, I'd pay to see that, but what's with the windows? I am so lost. At this point, you could be saying that you know the true meaning of life, but no one's going to hear it. They are so confused, you might as well not even be on the stage at all. No one in history has mastered the Beyoncé principle better than Steve Jobs. Does the turtleneck make sense now? If this were a regular presentation, your audience's little aha moment would also be distracting them from what you're talking about. But anyway, When Steve Jobs introduced the iPhone, he famously filled the screen with the iPhone and only the iPhone. This ease and simplicity of pairing spoken word with immediately connected visuals is precisely what made Steve Jobs so revolutionary. To illustrate just how radical his approach was, let's contrast him with Bill Gates. It's just so busy. First off, not only does your eye not know where to go first, but it's literally chock full of spoilers. When he starts out with the first item, People Network, he's talking, but the audience isn't listening to him. They can't help but read ahead. It's human nature. Now, half the audience is wondering what the heck Other Experiences from Microsoft and Others is all about, while the other half is distracted by that sweet iMac in the corner. Now, whatever Bill's saying is going in one ear and out the other because it's just too much. When everything is up there, nothing has impact. So let's go back to Steve Jobs. Ooh, so much better. When Steve had a vital piece of information he really wanted you to remember, he put it front and center. No distractions. Literally all of your attention is on Steve and that number, 499. In that moment, he is Beyoncé, the star of the show, because he is masterfully guiding your attention right where he wants it, telling his story to its fullest potential. Whenever Steve had more information to convey, he always did so in a clear, organized, easy to follow pattern. Your eye knows exactly where to go and what's being talked about. What's more, Steve never showed the entire list at the beginning. He understood spoilers. This is how he started. He introduced you to what he was talking about first, the iPad, a nice foundation of context. We know the playground we're playing in today. Then, as he said the next relevant fact, it appeared on the screen. Then the next. He's walking the audience through step by step so that no one reads ahead and no one gets lost. No one takes their attention away from the star of the show. This is why Steve Jobs is remembered as a master communicator, because he always expertly juggled his audience's attention, utilizing their visual and auditory learning in order to balance their attention, focusing all of the audience's energy on him as he effortlessly conveyed his message, making it both impactful and memorable. Now, this may feel like a huge legacy to live up to, a massive bar to reach, but you can do it. Just like juggling in real life, this skill can be learned. It's simple. Be mindful of your audience. Design your slides in order to manage their attention. And never forget, you're already Beyoncé. You've worked hard to perfect your business. You deserve a perfect pitch deck that emphasizes the star that you already are. If you need a little help with that, don't worry. That's precisely what we're here to help you with today, and we'll go over all of that during Q&A. But if you want a little extra hands-on help, that's what Ceemo is for. I've distilled my 10 years of pitch expertise and 25 plus years as an entrepreneur into this handy-dandy data-backed engine that creates an entire custom brand with logo, color scheme, and more, then seamlessly applies it across pitch decks, one-pagers, and a full suite of marketing assets designed to help you launch, sell, and fundraise. Plus, my experts and I are always on hand if you ever need hands-on help. Whether it's custom design work or strategy support, we're here to support you. If you'd like to join Ceemo, there's simply no better time than right now. Head over to Ceemo.ai to sign up now and use code BIGTHANKS to save a whopping 50% off all of our subscriptions. We decided to extend the sale from last time. In the meantime, check out Ceemo.ai/startout for a recording of last week's session, links to register for upcoming events, our free pitching resource guide, and so much more. And of course, don't forget to join us for the next installment of The Art of Pitching, where part 3 will cover how to design winning slides. It's all about helpful design tips and tricks to apply literally everything we've learned thus far, creating a beautiful and impactful deck that will help you shine. Use the QR code or head to Ceemo.ai/startup for all the details. It's coming up on August 20th, 3 to 4 p.m. Eastern, noon to 1 p.m. Pacific. Last but by no means least, I have some exciting news. We're running a grand finale sweepstakes. That's right, you could win a live pitch deck facelift session. My team and I will work on your deck live during the grand finale on August 27th. You can get all the details and enter to win at Ceemo.ai/startout or use the QR code to jump right to the entry form. There's no purchase necessary to win, but if you do decide to subscribe to Ceemo, we can show you how to use your new template to level up your story and get your deck ready for prime time. This is a prize worth over $1,800, so you don't want to miss out. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope to see you for part 3 on August 27th or August 20th. Wait, did I get the decks wrong? Oh no, that's the grand finale. Sorry. Anyway, now let's open things up for Q&A time. Thank you so much, and I can't wait to learn more about your company and what challenges you're having with presenting your deck. Thanks so much. And pardon my dog barking in the background. He just got back in from walkies and is very excited to say hi. Hi, come here, bud. If you have questions, please jump off mute and let's dive in.
Hi, can you hear me, Heather?
Yes, I can. Go right ahead.
Okay, awesome. Hi, I was trying to turn my video on, but I don't know if it did. I'm actually from, don't have a company, but I work in a company and I'm constantly I'm in product, but I feel like I'm always pitching because I'm in a leader position. And this is exactly what I'm struggling with is sometimes I feel I lose the audience and I bring them back. And it's very hard when you're virtual, even if you have your video up. So it was good listening and seeing some pointers, and I'm hoping I learn as we go. But that's all I had really is, just making sure I can focus and have some good statements as I go through information because my information can get pretty boring sometimes.
Yeah, I can understand that. It's especially hard when you're dealing with very dry topics. My best advice for that is keep your deck really simple and clean. The quickest way to lose people is just to overwhelm them with information. So keep the deck really simple. Think about how you can build elements in one at a time so that whatever they're seeing matches what you're saying as much as possible. Because then you're minimizing the task switching that's going on as they're trying to learn and absorb information. Like I'm sure you've attended a million and one Zoom seminars, and you know how long ones you just feel exhausted afterward. Yeah, your brain feels kind of fried. The reason for that is task switching. It's jumping between the ways we learn and absorb information. When you're listening, you're using a completely different cortex of your brain than when you're looking and reading at something. So if you try to throw both of those at once, you're overwhelming the audience and just exhausting them. So as much as possible, keep it clean, keep it simple, and then try to look for ways to interject a moment of levity, humor, some way to surprise them with something unexpected, and it'll draw them back in and give them a moment of lightness to then get back into learning. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Good luck. Any other questions? Please don't be shy. If you have any pitch challenges.
I think we have a question in the chat.
Oh, perfect. Okay, Amara says, hi, Heather. Thanks for all your support. I have a question about keeping it simple for a nonprofit. What might you suggest when introducing your nonprofit? Would you display your mission or have your mission verbally explained? That is a great question. Pitching for nonprofits can be very challenging. The great thing about mission statements is that they do give you a sense of direction, but I find that just jumping right into the mission can be a little dry sometimes because it's typically very abstract. It's a very macro level view of the problem. The great thing about pitching nonprofits is that you usually have a very human story to tell. You have someone who's struggling or a group who's struggling, some deep problem in the world that you are showing up to solve, and you're showing up to solve without trying to make money. So it gives you even more credibility and power in that moment to tell that very human story. So I would say, while you're talking about your mission, make it human, introduce the person or the people that you are trying to serve. Tell us what their life is like, their problem is like, how it affects them on a human level. And as you're describing that, give us a human face to look at, empathize with, and connect to. That'll make it personal for the audience and make them care more. Because we're hearing about a person, we're seeing a person, and we can imagine ourselves in that situation. Then once you've explained the pain points, help us feel there's a common phrase in nonprofits, the giver's high, that you want to give that audience the chance to feel that sense of emotion as you rise to stand up and solve this problem. And that's when you invite the audience in on the journey of what you do, what interventions you provide to then help and support that person. It makes the process of that mission statement so much more relatable and exciting for people to want to dive into. And then, of course, wrap that up with how the audience can jump in and help. Does that answer your question? Awesome.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a pitch in a couple of weeks that I have to do, basically just asking for money. And I'm finding it tough in my practice to really like transition. I kind of take on the conversational style. So just transitioning from like my story to the big ask, but still making it seamless and not just like, I don't know. I just want to still stay in my persona, if you will.
Yeah, I totally understand that. The best advice I can give you about flow is, to me, the biggest mistake a lot of founders make in that regard is they find a pitch deck template or they find a walkthrough of what you need to cover in the slide, and they think about each of those slides or chapters as separate things. And you almost have that sometimes straight verbal, sometimes just an emotion of, okay, next slide. And there's no flow between the slides. There's no yes and that ties the two together. So I like to think of pitch decks not as separate slides, but as an overarching story or argument. And each slide should be another step in your argument. So there's flow between them, so that when you're talking about your pricing, for instance, it's then logical and natural to say, now that you understand what it costs, let's talk about how that turns into our revenue projections. Now that we've talked about our revenue projections, let's talk about the macro view of that story and talk about how that fits in with the market opportunity. So you find as many ways as possible to logically tie each slide to the next that continues that conversation and that argument going forward. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
Cool. As for keeping it conversational, when you say that, do you mean that you don't usually have a script?
Well, I practice it enough where it's it kind of rolls off.
Okay, cool. Is there a specific spot in the pitch where you feel like you lose that conversationalness?
Yeah, I think as soon as I start talking about the money, because it just goes into like what I know I'm not really interested, but I am interested because it's my business, obviously, but it's just it's not as fun to talk about the money aspect. So I think I kind of lose interest in it myself, and that's what I have to kind of work on, just making it flow easier.
Okay. I would encourage you to do some thinking about what is it behind that feeling.
Right.
Why is it that you feel like the money makes you uncomfortable or that it's not as fun? Does
I
that
think
make
it's
sense?
just versus looking at logos and colors and pictures and then switching over to like Excel sheets, I think that's more the vibes of what's not fun.
Okay, that makes sense. Then we just need to talk about how to make graphs fun.
Right.
Because there is a way to do it to still make them colorful and pretty. Because yeah, Excel sheets are boring, and most of the time Excel sheets are honestly way too much information for the standard presentation. Excel sheets should be saved for the final investor presentation. They shouldn't typically be used in like a demo day pitch or in your first introductory pitch. That's one thing that a lot of founders forget or don't know about or aren't introduced to most often. That, you know how I talked about how there's an email pitch and a presentation deck? Of course, we could go into way more detail and say there are actually like 3 or 4 different types of presentation decks. There's the initial opening call. And at each of these steps, your goal isn't to get the check, it's to get to the next meeting. So the email deck is the first thing you send, either that or the one pager you send to the investor, and your goal there is to get the intro meeting. When you have the intro meeting, you then should have a 3-minute presentation deck with no Excel spreadsheets in it at all. It should just be an overview. And that's enough for the investor to, typically an LP, to say, oh, this is really interesting. I get enough. Let's have the managing partner on the call and we'll go into more detail. Then you have a longer, like 5 to 10-minute presentation. And then you can get into a little bit more of the Excel spreadsheets, but you still don't want to overwhelm people. Then they decide if they actually want to go through due diligence. And then when you're going through due diligence, you can have a full 20-minute presentation where you show all of the Excel spreadsheets. And so it's very easy when founders are introduced to pitch decks that sometimes they see the full 20-minute deck and think they somehow have to get through that in 3 minutes in the intro call. And then it gets overwhelming and you think, oh, another Excel spreadsheet, this is boring. So I would suggest find ways to take the data in those Excel spreadsheets, simplify them to the main takeaway, and then come up with a colorful way to turn it into a graph instead of an Excel spreadsheet. Does that make sense?
Definitely.
One of my favorite things to do when founders have like a standard revenue business model projections graph or Excel spreadsheet is to turn it into a series of colorful bars. And you hit just the highlights. I usually have colored bars for like 3 to 5 years, depending on what phase you're in. The year at the bottom, then at the top of each bar, I say what our revenue projections are for that year. And I don't even have the lines and the graphs that have like a range of numbers on the side. Don't even bother with that. It's literally just bars, year, revenue at the top. If you want to get a little more detailed, you can then overlay a different colored bar on top and show how much of that is cost and how much of that is profit. And that's it. It keeps it really clean, really simple for the audience to read, and they get that information so much faster than trying to read an Excel spreadsheet. So yeah, find ways to have fun with the money section and add pictures to make it pretty and all of that fun stuff. But good luck. Oh, and then one last thing on making money fun. It can be very easy when going through all the numbers to let the logical brain take over and just feel very dry and boring. Always see if you can find a way to drive it back to the customer and the value that provides. It can be a single sentence in and amongst all of the numbers that says, for instance, in our company's pitch deck for our most recent raise, I related back our goal for the year in revenue to saying that's 1,500 founders supported, able to launch their business. So you give an emotion to that number that also gives them context to how many users that'll be to represent that much money. So as much as possible, find a way to like close out each slide with a really impactful thing that makes it human again. Any other questions on that? Okay, cool. We have another 2 questions in chat. Greg said, do you have a good chart software that you like? Yes, several options. First, I know I'm biased. Ceemo has that bar graph slide built into all of our templates. So that's in there. But Canva also does a good job of having editable graphs in it, but my absolute favorite is Keynote on Apple. You can use it if you have a Mac, or you can always use their online version. Their design, built-in design features are really wonderful. That's what I built this class in. And it has tons of customization options to make the graphs really pretty in a variety of different styles. And then Mike asked in a pitch deck, you're welcome, Greg. Mike asked, in a pitch deck, should each slide have an image, parentheses, stock photos, to make it more visual, or are those stock images distracting? That's a great question, but I'm going to kind of deconstruct it a little bit and say I don't think a slide should ever have a picture on it just to have a picture on it. The point of a picture should be to convey information faster or to visualize what you were talking about. If that picture is helping the audience to understand information, it's doing something. It's functional on the slide. We'll get into this a little bit in the next section, but here's a little information. The human brain processes images 60,000 times faster than text. 60,000 times faster. So the point of a pitch is to get through your information in a very limited period of time. So if you can use a very well-placed picture to do that, you're helping them process the information faster and easier so that it takes less energy for the audience. When you combine images with immediately connected words, you increase memory retention by over 400%. It makes them more likely to remember what you're trying to say. So the point is, if you're going to use images or icons, find a way to make it blend with whatever information you're trying to convey, and it'll be way more impactful. As for stock images, I don't think you should be afraid of using stock images, but I always recommend that you try to keep every image within the same visual style so that it's consistent and that it matches your branding, the overall look and feel of your company, so that again, it looks consistent. There's nothing jarring in there, and it looks more professional and polished that way. So for instance, if you're using an icon, try to use the same style of icon consistently throughout. If you're using illustrations, make sure that they're consistent throughout, all of that good stuff. And there are lots of ways to do that for free. It just can take a little time sometimes to find them, but there are tons of great stock image and icon and illustration assets out there now. So yeah, have fun, find a way to visualize it, and it'll pay off. Any other questions? Please don't be shy. If you have any challenges with public speaking, nerves, how to design your deck, all of that good stuff, or if you're having a challenge with how to form your own story, we can workshop that. Yes, Sarah, that's a great point. So Sarah just popped into chat, responding to Mike, that we'll dive into this more in the next class, which is very true. The next session is all about how to apply all of the theory in this class and the one before, using design tricks to help information flow more easily. We'll get into pitch software options, the pros and cons of like Google Slides versus PowerPoint, how to find free fonts, icons, images, ways to tweak images to make them look consistent, all of that good stuff. Laura has a great question. How long should a pitch deck be on average? That is a great question. I usually recommend that every founder has a variety of different slide decks ready to go. You should always have, this isn't necessarily a slide, but you should have like a 30-minute blurb that introduces your company very quickly. 30-second blurb, sorry, not 30 minutes. 30-second blurb that introduces your company very quickly. That should be like you meet someone in an elevator or at a cocktail party and you can explain your company. You should always have a 2 to 3 minute slide deck for very short introductions. A good 5-minute deck for like those intro meetings, the first time you'll meet investor. Take a lay down, buddy. Sorry about the barking. A good 5 to 8-minute deck, and then a more detailed 10 to 15-minute deck for like the investor presentations where you dive into more detail. That way you're covered for any possible pitch scenario. Amaris asked what, I hope I'm pronouncing your name correctly, by the way. What might be compelling information to include on appendix slides? Appendix slides are great to have on hand if for a variety of different things. First, if you know that you're consistently getting asked a specific type of follow-up question on the regular, always have a slide ready to answer that question. I also like to have additional slides in the appendix about other verticals you could apply your company's IP to. For instance, in our pitch deck, I talk about how the underlying seamless application of your brand can be applied to things like UI, UX prototypes in Figma, or one-click custom branded Shopify or Squarespace sites, etc., to show that there are other paths to broader revenue. So if you can do that with your own, if it applies to your company, that's great to have in the appendix. Greater detail on your traction and customers, that's great. Yeah, stuff like that. I hope that helps answer your question. But yeah, the more you pitch and the more you practice, you'll see what questions people typically get. And if you're really careful, you can also tee up those questions and help engage the audience, make them feel smart when they ask those questions, and help them feel like they're, really grasping it quickly. That's always great. 1 second. Okay. Lisa asked for a demo day pitch. Should finance be involved or keep it out? That's a very good question. It's a very good question. It totally depends on the demo day audience. Sorry, 1 sec. He's recovering from surgery. I'm going to give him a belay stick to keep him quiet so he doesn't keep bothering you all. Lay down. There we go. I think you should always include what you charge, because that's fundamental about how your business operates. And I think sometimes it's okay to include revenue projections to a certain point, but always check with your managing director and see what's normal and expected for their demo day, and let them guide you on the experience of cohorts that have come before you. And that'll really tell you how much to convey. What you need to keep in mind is no matter where you're pitching, unless there's an NDA involved, always ask yourself, am I comfortable if my fiercest competitor sees all of this information? And that can be a good guiding principle on finances as well. Now, if you're okay with your competitor seeing that information, great. The next question you should ask is, what are current SEC rules? Because there are rules about what you can say and how you can offer a private investment to a non-accredited audience. I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you exactly what that line is, but that can be a good guiding principle as well. But typically speaking, for a demo day, you at least want to cover cost, and then you're helping the investor basically make that math in their head of how many users would they need to acquire in order to reach like 1 million ARR, that kind of thing. I hope that helped answer your question. But if you have any more details or follow-ups, Lisa, please feel free to put that in the chat. You're welcome. Glamorous Amaris, did I get that right? I hope I did. Thank you. Yay. That's a beautiful name. I like it. Cool. Okay, any other questions? And again, apologies about all the barking. Has anyone run into weird investor feedback yet that you're having a hard time deciphering? That can be a common thing as well. No. I'd love to hear what stage of investment you're in, like friends and family, angel round, pre-seed, seed, series A, because all of those can have slightly different pitch perspectives as well. That's a great question. Do you have advice for checking if the person I am presenting to is still following what I am saying in a way that seems organic, especially when we are virtual? As much as possible, I always like to make sure that I can see my audience while I'm presenting. So that I can kind of look at them and see if they're reacting to certain points, like either nodding along or scribbling something down or having some kind of way to engage. And if you notice that they're kind of, drifting off or looking at their phone, to some degree, there's only so much you can do when they're clearly not interested. But I always like to plan certain moments of levity or unexpectedness into my pitch to make sure I snap their attention back. This is going to sound really weird at first, but a good metaphor with all the barking too is think of your audience as a puppy on a leash, and you're the person walking the puppy. And your job as a presenter is to make sure that you are guiding that puppy right where you want it to focus its attention. But it's a puppy. It's going to go, ooh, squirrel, or ooh, person to sniff, or oh, that person called me pretty. Like, there's so many ways that its attention is going to ping all over the place. So it's always good at any given moment in your pitch to plan, okay, I'm going to be talking about money now. It's very dry. I need to have a moment to keep them from going squirrel. So put in little jokes, little moments here and there when things start to get dry to snap that leash back to direct them where you want them to be. And that can be a great way to organically, but even though it's planned, make sure that their attention is where you want it. You're welcome. Okay, Greg said, I am currently trying to get small investment to expand, basically friends and family. First time making an ask. That is a big phase, Greg. At friends and family stage, the main thing they're going to be investing in is you. So it's going to be very much about telling that story of why you want to build this company or why you are building the company. Get very detailed into the problem solution narrative, but make it a story, make it relatable, make it human, and then show that you have a clear path toward either raising your next round or generating solid revenue. It's very much about belief in you. So as much as you can, explain that story, explain why it matters to you and what they can expect out of it. I hope that's helpful. And then the last thing I'll say about early pitching for the first time, I find, at least me, I felt really awkward about asking for money. Like I was begging for money. And especially when you come to angels later on, but also with family, please don't put yourself in that mindset of a power differential where you're begging, because you're not. You are inviting the audience on an exciting opportunity that they are lucky to be part of. But at the same time, you want to give them a sense of some degree of safety and some degree of trust that you've thought this through. There will always be risk. You need to be honest about the risk, but also do everything you can to show that you've done your homework to mitigate that risk. I hope that makes sense. Amaris says, I am currently in seed early. And Greg says, trying to prep for angel funding as well. You're welcome, Greg. Okay, early seed and angel funding is very similar. Much like a friends and family round, a big focus is going to be on investing in you as a person, but adding more business fundamentals to convince them that you have a solid understanding of your market, why your customer experiences this pain point, why they're the ones willing to shell over money to solve this problem, and why you are the person to solve it. A big part of early pitch decks is about convincing the audience that you are special, because 9 out of 10 startups fail. And there are specific what are known as valleys of death that happen right after investment rounds where those 9 out of 10 startups fail. And so your job is to convince the audience that you are that 1 in 10 who will make it. So a lot of that relies on founder market fit. What is unique and special about you or your team that gives you a better odd to succeed? And then making sure that you make it crystal clear that you understand your customer, you know how to speak to them, you know how to sell to them, and you know how to solve their problem. So if you can accomplish those 2 things in your pitch of whatever length of time you have, you'll have a much better chance of securing investment. And that's really the main difference between early stage pitching and later stage pitching, where Series A, it kind of flips a little bit and they care a lot less about story. And it's much more about show me the data, show me the numbers, show me what you've achieved. And that will then tell them, oh, you've already figured out how to talk to your customer. Oh, you just finished. So Emrys just said, I just finished an angel investor program. I'd love to hear what that was like, and what you got out of it too. Angel investors are really funny. They're very unique. Oh, that is, while you're typing, that is another difference between angel and pre-seed seed, is that angels, their intentions are different and their circumstances are different. A VC fund, you're typically talking to someone who actually has a boss. Most people think of investors as, oh, they're just rich people with money and they can decide to throw it around. But institutional venture capital funds have a boss, and their boss is that collection of really rich people who are throwing their money around. But they have they're restricted because they have to answer to those pool of rich people who have put money into the fund. So you're talking to LPs who have to justify every investment to a higher power. They're getting paid to wisely invest money in a specific swath of the market for a very specific reason, and they have to provide a return within a specific amount of time. So your job in pitching to them is to give them all of the information required for them to go back and satisfy their boss. That's completely different than an angel investor who is someone who is really wealthy. If they don't invest in you, they'll just go to Cancun for 2 months and sail on their yacht. They don't care. They're investing typically for some kind of personal reason. And if they're an experienced angel investor, they know that their odds of return are really, really risky. They're typically doing it for another reason. They either have a specific industry that they find really interesting. If you find a really good one, they're investing to try and level the venture capital field for underrepresented founders like us, or a lot of women angel investors do it to support women founders. So the trick in pitching to angels is to figure out what's their motivation and why are they investing. And then your job is to convince them to invest rather than go sail on their yacht in Cancun. Hope all that makes sense. Emrys said, pitch competition of 10 Black and brown founders, pitching for 100K through a leadership program. Unfortunately, did not win, but walked away with a business plan pitch deck, working on 501c3, nice funding, and launching by spring of 2025. It's called Surge Angels 2024. That sounds really cool. All in 6 months. Wow. That is a lot to walk away from a program with. That sounds really awesome. Very cool. Yeah, programs like that can be so helpful where they give you the infrastructure and the time and the support to work on all of those kind of things. Because it can be very lonely as a founder during those early stages trying to figure all that out on your own. So that sounds like a wonderful experience. I'm excited to check them out. Awesome. Well, we're almost out of time. So if you have any last minute questions, any other challenges, anything else you want to know, any questions about the contest, whatever it is, speak up. Don't be shy. I don't bite. Oh, nice. There's someone here from Third. Are there any unique questions about pitching as an underrepresented founder? That can be quite a minefield as well. I've run into that quite a lot. One last bit of advice I'll throw out there. Hopefully you're all typing in questions before we run out of time, but don't forget that part of the pitch is also very much a performance. One of the most common mistakes I see with founders pitching is that they get really bad advice sometimes where they get told, oh, you should have a script and you need to prepare and you need to know what you're going to say. So founders put a lot of time into writing a script and rehearsing it and presenting it, and they feel like they're doing all the right things. And then an investor will tell them, you sound like you're reading. You should stop with the script and be more conversational. And then they're like, wait, I thought I was supposed to have a script and be prepared. And I always hate when investors say that because it's what they're reacting to is right and human, but the feedback is really bad. What they're reacting to is a flat monotone voice. Most human beings, when we read aloud, we read like this. It's very flat. There is no rise and fall in our voice, and it sounds very monotone. And that is very different than when you're having a conversation with a friend, and the vast majority of people have a natural intonation, rise and fall in their voice. So if an investor tells you, go off script, be more conversational, what they really mean is that they're missing a natural rise and fall of your voice. So as much as possible, yes, please prepare, have a script or at least bullet points of what you want to cover so that you can get through your pitch and what you want to cover and you don't forget anything important in the limited time span you have. But don't forget that it's also a performance. It's very much voice acting. So when I'm practicing a pitch, I like to, at least for several run-throughs, imagine I'm not on a stage, I'm not in a Zoom room, I'm not talking to an investor. I'm talking to my best friend at a Kiki and having a great time. And so I can feel the rise and fall of my voice and what that feels like when I'm presenting with that more conversational tone. I hope that makes sense. Awesome. You're welcome, Greg. Thanks so much for coming.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Heather, for being here today. This was really awesome.
Thank you so much. I really hope you all enjoyed it and hope to see you for the next one.
Yes, thank you, everyone. We hope to see you again. I think it's on Tuesday, the next session, if I'm correct. Yeah, I'm seeing nods. So you can go back to the Eventbrite where you registered for this one and register for that one. And we hope to see you again and have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thanks so much for being here.
Thanks, everybody. Good luck.
Thanks.